All right. Okay. Yeah, we have a few more people. All right. Looks like most people have joined and we can start. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Merhawi Tailu. I'm the Assistant VP for the Professional Development Committee at WITS, working with Andrea and Barbara. The Professional Development Committee presents to you an interactive workshop on how to build your personal brand. The workshop will focus on leveraging social media, specifically LinkedIn, on how to build your personal brand as well as your professional brand, led by Madeline, who's the founder of Be the Brand. I would like to introduce Madeline, who will be the facilitator for today's workshop. Madeline graduated from George Washington University with a Master of Art and took on multiple roles prior to switching to full-time entrepreneur. Madeline, thank you for joining us today. We're glad to have you. And yesterday I was happy to celebrate International Women's Day. And today we have the opportunity to celebrate Madeline, who's a women business owner. Thank you, Madeline, and over to you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks all you guys for being here over your lunch hour to learn more about how you can be thinking about investing in your digital presence and your personal brand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of frame up how we're going to spend the time together. And then we do have a couple of polls because I just want to take a pulse check kind of on like where you guys are today, like what your starting point is for thinking about personal branding and LinkedIn. And then we're going to talk through just some tools that you could think about utilizing in order to really build and boost that virtual or that digital presence. We're going to spend the majority of the time talking about LinkedIn just because, you know, as we know, LinkedIn really is kind of like that professional digital sandbox. One thing we also know that's really important to frame the conversation today is LinkedIn has really shifted away from just being that static online resume, and now it's a thought leadership platform. And so when we think about how we're leveraging LinkedIn, we're thinking about how do we kind of create a presence that leverages both our personal and professional brand and experience in order to elevate our own thought leadership. That's like really the way LinkedIn has been shifting over the last couple of years, particularly with the pandemic and everything. So let me just tell you a little bit about Be the Brand and how we started and kind of our ethos for how we work. So I had a career basically working in women's leadership. I worked for a number of nonprofits around Washington, D.C. that work specifically with women leaders. And through that experience, you know, I just had the wonderful opportunity to know women and to work alongside just really impressive women who were out there doing the work, running their teams, running their homes. But when you looked them up online, they had almost no digital presence. And I just thought that was such a shame because they're missing out on opportunities for themselves, for their businesses, for their companies, for their organizations, et cetera. And so I started digging a little deeper, and basically what we found is that it's, you know, so much of it is a capacity issue. So again, these women are the ones out there doing the work. You're running your teams and your businesses, et cetera. So who has time to invest in that personal thought leadership on LinkedIn? But what we also know is that it's very important. And so we created Be the Brand really to help guide and serve as a thought partner with executive level women to build that digital presence. It really is all about amplifying women's voices and the belief that the more women we have speaking into important conversations, the better those conversations are going to be. And it's also good for us as an individual because we get more opportunities out of it when we have this great online presence. So that's really the whole idea behind the work that we do. And so that's what I want to talk to you guys about today is how you guys can be thinking about leveraging the work that you're already doing, your existing activity online in a way that could hopefully position you for more opportunities, et cetera. So as we get started, I do want to, I have 3 polls because I want to get a pulse check on where y'all are in terms of your comfort level with social media et cetera. And so I think, Merwit, let's go ahead and turn to that.
Sure.
And then how do we see the poll results?
We have so far, most people are responding. I'm just gonna give a few, maybe a few more seconds before I'll end the poll and the results will be displayed.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, I think I can end now.
Okay, great. So the majority of us today are moderately comfortable with LinkedIn. Okay, great.
All right, next one. In a few more seconds, and I will end. All right.
Okay, great. So the majority of y'all are using it often.
Okay, and then last one. Here we go. In a few more seconds, and I will end the poll.
Okay, a little bit. Great. It's the majority. Okay, great. Well, I hope so. The first part of what we're going to do is talk about goal setting when we approach our digital presence. So I hope that after our time together, you guys will be thinking with a little more clarity and intention about how you approach your digital presence. It's so important, and I'll talk about that when we get there. And then I'm also going to save time at the end for questions, because one thing we know is that when we build online presence and personal brands, it needs to be authentic. And so it needs to be about you as a multidimensional person. And that means you're going to have your own kind of set of challenges or conceptions or whatever when you approach your LinkedIn. And so would be happy to kind of, brainstorm ideas or answer questions around maybe some particular challenges that you've had when you've thought about, investing in your presence. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with y'all. Okay, great. I'm assuming this works. I'm assuming y'all can all see this. If not, just shout out.
Yeah, I can see. I can see your screen.
Okay, so when we think about approaching the work of building a personal brand, really what we're doing is we're taking your existing professional and personal reputation and just translating it into an online presence. So a lot of what I think about is how we actually are content curators, in the sense that the best things to amplify on your platforms are the things that you're already doing, the work that you're already doing, the things about you that you care about, et cetera. Instead of like being content creators. We're not trying to make influencers or anything like that, but we are trying to garner influence within the certain audiences that we're speaking to. And so, as we know, elevating your brand can result in great opportunities, regardless of kind of what your goals might be. And we're going to talk about goals on the next slide. And so we want to make sure that we always have goals that are aligning to the work that we're doing, so that the presence doesn't seem scattered and kind of all over the place. Another thing we think about a lot is brand building as a personal and professional marketing tool. So if you look at the budgets for the big like Fortune 500 companies, and you look at their marketing budgets this year, you'll see that the highest line item is Instagram. And that's because they know that they're investing the majority of their marketing dollars into Instagram because that's about personal influence. And so whatever you're doing in terms of if you're marketing yourself, if you're marketing your business, using a social platform can really help grow that, for business development or for yourself. I want to talk about authenticity and building a multidimensional brand. So I think authenticity is a tricky word because, like for me, if I think about like my authentic self or whatever, like I'm a mother of young children. And so like, it's kind of a hot mess, and that's not necessarily the presence I want to have online, but I am also, and so the way that I think about it instead is bringing that multidimensional part of myself to the online presence. So that means, that I do talk about being a mother and things that are important to me with parenting, whether it's commenting about parental leave, or something like that, because that is part of who I am and it's important to me. And so I want to elevate those parts of myself while not posting, like the sink full of dishes or like the sweatpants with the spit up, kind of situation. So I think just thinking about authenticity and being multidimensional as the same thing, just like different in terms of like what we lead with. And then the last thing is just, talking about bragging about ourselves. Like, again, we are all out there doing the work. I am assuming that all of y'all are very high achieving, successful professionals that also care deeply about things that are going on in your communities, with your teams, et cetera. And so, a great way to gain attraction and attention for you and your business, and also the causes you care about, is to put it out there, and to talk about it. So those are our 4 kind of things we think about. Okay, let's talk about goals. So if everybody could get out a piece of paper and a pen, what we're going to do is I want everybody to we're going to take a couple minutes and write down some goals that you might have when you think about, why would I want to invest in my digital presence? Like, what is the end goal? Like, why does it matter to me? And like, here are some of my examples, like some of my goals. So a goal of mine is to establish my own personal thought leadership, to amplify the causes that I care about, to attract speaking opportunities, and then of course, business development. So to generate business for Be the Brand. So those are 4 of my goals. And those are the anchor that I think about when I am working on like a content calendar or something like that. So if everybody can take like 2 to 3 minutes, I'll watch the clock. And then I would love it if we would have a couple brave people share with the group some of their goals that they have written down. Okay, we have about 30 seconds left. Okay, great. Who wants to share some of the objectives or goals that they wrote down? Yes, go for it. Megan.
Hi, thank you, Madeline. Let's see. So the goals that I wrote down. So I'm like a young professional. I'm just starting out in my career. So some of my goals are sort of based around that. I'd say the first goal is demonstrate my ability since I am just starting out. I want to sort of showcase what I'm good at, the experiences that I do have. I'd like to sort of build a network of other individuals in the same field and learn from what they're posting. See what's most important to them, and then I can see that and learn from that. And then potentially attract opportunities or become aware of opportunities that are out there. So those are the 3 goals that I put down.
Those are great. Those are awesome. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to hop in?
Yeah, I had similar ones like Megan. It's more industry knowledge, opportunities, and just kind of wanting to see events related within that specific industry or related to my job.
So do you mean when you're talking about industry, are you talking about like showcasing your industry knowledge or learning from others? Or I mean, it could certainly be both.
Yeah, it's more learning from others and kind of seeing where the trends are heading, where there's like a certain policy change, where that would kind of lead to, or projects that are going to be coming up based on that specific change, or anything pretty much from a learning standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, as we know, LinkedIn has 2 sides of a coin. You can consume information on LinkedIn and you can post and engage with information on LinkedIn. And so what you're talking about is being a consumer on LinkedIn. And there is thought and strategy, making sure you're following all the right associations, organizations, the thought leaders in your industry, et cetera, so that your feed is like created and curated to be based off of the information like you want to consume. And that does take intention, because you have to make sure you're following all the right ones and et cetera. And then also you can think about like within that, if you engage with some of those thought leadership posts, your name will start kind of popping up in the conversations, even if you're not actually doing your own posting. So that can, in a sense, almost elevate you as somebody who's like tuned in, cares about these issues, also is in the field. And so that's, kind of like another way to think about approaching, having intention behind what we consume on LinkedIn. It's really good.
Yeah. And actually, you bring up a great point. I remember past few board meetings for we talked, there was conversations about individuals who are in the senior leadership level. They have so much knowledge, but those knowledge are not available to other younger professionals.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that would also be from a point where you are at a level where you become expert in the field. I think that would be the point where you're now contributing to the content so that others can kind of learn. So I guess there's 2 sides to it, as like wanting to learn information versus when you're at the point where you want to share for younger professionals that can benefit from the knowledge that you do have.
Right.
So, WIT has a group of both young professionals as well as senior professionals. So I think that makes perfect sense for both sides.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So when just when we think about goals, I think one of the reasons why LinkedIn and social media can feel so overwhelming is because we don't approach it with clarity and intention. And therefore it can feel all over the place. You're kind of like, what am I going to post about? Why do I care? Why does it matter? And so again, if we really think about okay, I want to use this to get speaking opportunities, then you can kind of create the roadmap for the content that you're going to create and how you're going to position yourself on the platform so that you already look like either somebody who does speaking engagements or somebody who would be great to be featured on a panel or whatever it might be. So I just encourage everybody, like, if you want to invest in it, really thinking at the beginning what you're trying to get out of it will help set you up for success in a different way. So moving to the next thing we talk about, the next tool we use, we have this tool called a personal message house. And really what it is it's a structure to help us visualize how we can create the personal profile. Again, when we approach it, it can feel very overwhelming. But I think if you just have like a couple of these tools to really think about the goals and the objectives, and then the personal message house, it can help you execute with intention easier. So the 3 parts of the personal message house is we call the brand purpose, which is the ultimate message you want to communicate and leave people with. So if somebody goes to your LinkedIn page and is kind of scrolling through your past activity and looking at your bio and et cetera, it's really the sense that you communicate to them and what you leave people with. This is also similar to like if you're at a networking event, and you're talking to somebody for 10 minutes, like what are you communicating and what are you leaving people with? This is the same thing, but just translated online. So we want to, again, make sure that like when we're posting things, they're thoughtful, they matter, they mean something. You're speaking into the conversations you want to be speaking into, et cetera. The pillars is the actual kind of content. It's what you're talking about. So, and we're going to workshop this on the next slide. This is where really that multidimensional aspect comes in. A lot of times people have like 5 pillars. So they have like 5 different buckets of content that they want to be speaking to and building a presence around. And then the foundation is that brand voice. So it's the tone and the way content can sound. A lot of people have online personas. They like to be, say they're really funny and witty in real life. And so they want to bring that into their online presence. And so they have witty voices with their LinkedIn. This is also where you can think about just taking a couple minutes to say, okay, do I want to talk about the fact that I'm a woman in this industry? How do I want to talk about it? How do I want to talk about, political affiliations, et cetera? And so if you can just kind of, again, do that work up front to say, actually, I'm not going to talk about either of those things. Or I am going to talk about it and I'm going to talk about it in this way. It helps you moving forward, not have to think through that every time you post something. So here's an example of a couple of brand purposes. So this again is like almost like an elevator pitch kind of thing. This is like a couple sentences about who you are. And from here, again, if this is the essence that we want people to have when they walk away from your page, we use this as the guide, obviously, to think about what all the content will be speaking to. So it all ladders together. So here's some examples. Let's take just a couple minutes. We're not going to be able to like perfect these or anything, but just to get the ideas flowing, like take a couple minutes and write out, like when somebody goes to your LinkedIn, like what do you want them to know about you? Or what are the key messages you hope they're taking away from your profile? And I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. All right. Anybody brave enough to share? Megan, you want to share?
Sure. I didn't write like a nice blurb like what's on the screen. But I'd say that again, since I'm sort of an early professional, I think that my brand purpose would be to show, that I'm a high growth professional, that I have, not sort of the wide ranging expertise of 25 years, in industry, but, a certain level of expertise or at least awareness of, ongoing, trends in the industry and some level of connectedness with other professionals and at least a deliberate engagement with those themes. So that would be my brand purpose.
Mhm. That's great. All right, anybody else want to share? Put it out there. Okay, great. Okay. Let's talk about this. The next part is really fun. So this is like all the buckets. This is like the pillars of content. So again, once you you have your goals, you know what you want to get out of it. You have that overall brand purpose. So you have that overall feeling of what you want to be communicating to people. And then from that brand purpose, you should really be thinking about, okay, how do my individual areas of expertise and the conversations that I can speak credibly into ladder up to that brand purpose. So for me, again, in the spirit of being multidimensional, like I have a bunch of different things that I'll talk about on LinkedIn, personal branding, LinkedIn itself. I'm from Texas, and I love that, and I'm really proud of that. I have a background in international affairs, philanthropy, women's leadership, and then partnership building is something, it's like one of those like soft skills that I think is really important for myself to be positioned in that way. And so I like to think about partnerships as well. So this is like, where you get the opportunity to really sit down and think about, okay, again, like what are the 4 or 5 things, whether it's, the extracurricular like community things you're involved with or volunteer with, subject matter expertise for your industry, etc. So again, we're going to do the same thing. This is our last little homework assignment is let's take a couple minutes and just write out those buckets of content that you would then build, posts and things around. So everybody take 3 minutes to do that as well. And then Megan, to your question, prompts available to help narrow your pillars of focus. What do you mean by that?
Actually, I realized that they're kind of in the top of this slide. So never mind.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Let's take a couple minutes to share some of these. Anybody who wants to just jump in and share some of the buckets that they wrote down that would maybe potentially help stir ideas amongst the other people on this call.
I was just thinking, highlighting women in leadership, because that kind of, I guess, two ways. One, if that would be an opportunity to kind of see the paths that they've taken and kind of take follow their kind of leadership. But another would be to also encourage and so that they are better able to share their knowledge that would benefit others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like amplifying other women leaders as like
Right.
one of the like main activities that you do on your platform.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And which aligns with WIT, which is the Women in International Trade, and it's empowering and mentoring younger professionals within the industry who are switching from could be from different parts, government to private, the different sectors, and just kind of benefiting from the women who are in leadership and kind of going with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Who has another one they thought of? Megan, you can jump in.
Yeah, I definitely thought of something similar, because that's one of the causes that I really care about, especially women representation in politics. So, but I did like struggle and just do generally with tying that to like my professional work. And I guess like I've had this question kind of throughout this presentation, because and imagine that many others on the call have this kind of conflict where there's only so much that we can say about what we're doing at work, whether we work in government or outside of government, or wanting not to clash with, let's say, like our organization or company's brand and like what they're doing. So there are pillars that I certainly would love to speak to, like trade, policy and what I work on in my capacity in my job, but don't always know if I can like go, within my own boundaries and speak to my expertise there that doesn't clash with like what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So I think just to kind of echo the philanthropy part, like I think philanthropy is like a really natural way to do that, and talking about increasing women in trade and amplifying like women leaders in trade, but that's not necessarily the policy work. So I guess maybe that's an open question of just like how would you kind of navigate those clashing interests within maybe like one pillar or between pillars?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's very relevant here in DC for sure. And the majority of the folks that we work with have the same kind of nuances that they need to think through. So, I mean, one thing I say is if you have guidance from your office, I know a lot of offices, like it depends on so many things, but if you do have guidance from your office or your company or organization, I would definitely say use that and stick with that in terms of the industry related posting, et cetera. I would say that there are probably things that they would actually really like you to be amplifying and posting. But you might need to dig a little bit or ask a couple questions around your office in order to figure that out, like what they would be happy for you to do. And then I would say, if there are things that are off limits that you can't talk about, instead of trying to thread the needle, I would just not talk about those things and refocus on the other pillars, and know that perhaps someday, if you are in a different job or something like that, then that'll be an opportunity to talk about that work that you did do. And so I think it's hard. I mean, we have a lot of people who really have to leave their work and their day-to-day on the table, like leave it off the table when they're talking about building the brand presence. I also think that there are really like soft hand things that you can do, like like this would be a great example, like your involvement with WIT. Like if you're a trade expert, you know, or you're in the trade industry, et cetera, like this in and of itself, like it's not talking about policy, but it is talking about the industry. And so amplifying like this work, you know, any kind of extracurriculars you do with like other people who work in the industry, et cetera, could help you like have that industry footprint without, you know, doing anything that would ruffle any feathers. Does that help?
That's super helpful. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, I also had a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I guess, in terms of the bucket personal branding, if you could elaborate on, you know, what sorts of content or what sorts of themes might come in that bucket. Yeah, just I guess elaborating on what that is, because the other ones seem like clear to me.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I mean, personal branding is like my industry essentially. And so I want to really position myself as a personal branding expert. And then I also want to share things that I think are useful that other people should know about personal branding on my platform. And so this is like when there are articles that come out about trends in personal branding or how executives are investing a lot in their personal brand, or, you know, this would also be like leadership articles. I think in the pandemic and in the last couple of years, we've really seen that professionals want authentic leaders. And so executives are across the board investing in their personal brand. And so, you know, posting examples of that, like how we see it come to life, et cetera. And so this, for me, this would really kind of be that like subject matter expertise, industry knowledge.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's move on. I want to make sure we get a chance to talk about LinkedIn really quick before we do some questions. So one of the things I really encourage you guys to do at a minimum is to take stock of what your LinkedIn profile looks like. So every time, well, maybe not every time, but a lot of the times that you're about to go into a meeting with somebody new or you're getting on the phone, people are looking you up on LinkedIn to see who you are before they get on the phone with you. It's like the easiest way to get a sense of like who's going to be in the meeting, who's going to be on the call, et cetera. So the way that your LinkedIn looks actually really does matter professionally. And more so as LinkedIn continues to like really dominate the professional social media space. So I've kind of broken down, there's like 7 parts of the LinkedIn profile, and you know, we can send this to you guys afterwards, but there are 7 parts of the LinkedIn profile that you should take some time to kind of tick through and take stock of like how your profile actually looks. So the top is a banner. I mean, we're lucky because we live in Washington, D.C., and so many of us work in industry or work in something related to something at DC. And so a lot of folks do just like beautiful landscape posts or, you know, like the flags around the World Bank or, you know, something like that. So finding a LinkedIn banner like should actually be pretty easy for you guys because there's just like a lot of tangible examples just around town. There's right underneath your profile, your headshot is your name, and then this headline section. A lot of people just use the headlines to restate what their current title is, which is a missed opportunity just because your current title is already listed down in your work experience. So people are already going to see that. And so your headline is actually an opportunity for you to showcase more about yourself than just your current title. So like I have CEO and founder of Be the Brand, advocate for women's leadership, and strategic brand builder. So those were the 3 things I wanted to showcase in my headline. Make sure you have a bio, make sure it's up to date, make sure it's not 3 pages long, like it should be short, engaging, really, again, showcase you overall, who you are, not necessarily, you know, the detailed bullet points of like every job you've ever had. It should be like short, engaging, to the point. If you do post often on LinkedIn, or you are really trying to elevate your presence, I would recommend utilizing the featured section. That just allows you essentially to pin the most important or most interesting posts you've done to your profile, so that they sit at the top of your profile. So as people scroll down, it'll be one of the first things that they see. So a lot of times people will pin like speaking engagements, podcasts they participated in, big announcements, awards they received, etc. And then, make sure your work experience is up to date, that it looks good. Consistency is like the most important thing here. So I actually use this. This is an example of what not to do, even though it doesn't look bad, right? But it's inconsistent. So you'll see that under the Vital Voices position, the geotag is Washington, District of Columbia, United States. And then under the Be the Brand, it's Washington, DC metro area. So the geotags are inconsistent. So take a second, make sure your geos are consistent. The other thing that's wrong about this post is that Be the Brand has a description here and Vital Voices does not. So either is fine, but they just need to be consistent. So if you're having a description for one of your job posts, you need to make sure that you have a short descriptor for each, and that you don't leave any out. Obviously, things that you volunteer with, great to put on there. Make sure you're putting all your extracurriculars up there, etc. That's really important and really helps make you a more interesting person. You're not just the work that you do, you're the person that you are. And so you want to make sure to really showcase all those parts about yourself. And then the last section that we find, if you're just doing a quick hit list, is the education. So the general rule of thumb is, well, I'll go back. So for work experience, the general rule of thumb is if it is a position that's more than 20 years old and it's not directly relevant to your current job or to where you're headed, you don't actually need to include it. So if you're getting in a scenario where you have like 10 work experiences listed on your LinkedIn, and some of them are from 25 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever, take a look at them. Sometimes they are relevant. Maybe in the early days you did an internship with the World Bank in, I don't know, Kenya or something. That would be relevant, right? Like that would make sense. But if it's not relevant, and you don't feel any like it's not part of your brand story or the brand narrative that you're telling, you should think about removing it so that it just stays tight and concise. And then the last thing is for education. It's up to you if you want to put like the dates that you're graduating. If you're older and you're concerned about ageism in your company or something like that, just don't put them on there. You don't have to. And so it's up to you to decide if you want to put your graduation date on your LinkedIn profile. Okay, that was a lot of information. This is my favorite quote. I think it's really helpful. It's really helped me as I've thought about building this business and the ethos of it, because as women, I think it's hard for us to step out. We just kind of deal with a higher level of imposter syndrome. Plus here in DC, we stand in the shadow of so many great bosses. And so it's hard to navigate, like Megan was saying, like what is the best way to put yourself out there that's not gonna, result in actually negative consequences because of perceptions of what you're doing. And so I just love this, Bose says, nobody started talking about me until I started talking about me. And I just think that that's really clever and a great thing that I think about a lot when I'm thinking about how do I position myself, and then how do I work with executives to get, them to think thoughtfully about how they're positioning themselves as well. Okay. Happy to answer questions or brainstorm ideas, or however you guys want to spend the last 10 minutes.
There's a question in the chat, Madeline.
Okay, great. Okay, Pauline.
Yeah, maybe I
Yeah.
can read it out. I don't know if you hear me.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, sorry. I was just like walking home. I'm phoning in from Brussels,
No worries.
Belgium. Yeah, so I just wanted to say thanks so much. I just wanted to know, like how detailed do you need to be in, kind of the professional experience section where, you describe the responsibilities in your role.
Mhm.
Like is brevity better, or what I have in my current one is actually quite detailed. I
Mhm.
have like, let's say about eight bullet points for each kind of role I've been in.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say it depends on why you're using LinkedIn. So if you are looking for a job, wanting to make a job pivot, something like that, I would say, yes, more detail would be better. Like if you're kind of like on the hunt. If you're a small business owner, or if you're a consultant or something like that, like if you have to generate your own business, yes, I would say it's fine to, really detail what it is. But if you are using it for like thought leadership, and it's not necessarily related to like career, like new jobs or generating business, I would actually say brevity is better, so that people will continue scrolling down to see everything about you and don't get kind of bogged down in some of the details. If they're wanting to get to know you like as a person for your thoughts and ideas, etc., I would say brevity is better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. I mean, think about it in terms of like a resume, right? Like if you're using LinkedIn like a resume with all the details and the bullets, then I would assume it's because you have a need for a resume, right? Either business development or wanting a new job. If you're not, then I would say, or if you don't have those objectives, then you don't need to treat it as much like a resume.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
A question just about like timing, I guess. So I think all of these exercises are so beneficial to just, as you said, like kind of establish your intent at the start. But once you start to really establish your intent and start to build your brand, like how much time do you spend, I guess, on a weekly basis maintaining that brand? Like, do you act more in the moment, or do you kind of plan for content? Like, if we were doing International Women's Day for WIT, say, like, probably best to do that a couple of days in advance to like think about it, just so as to you're not like just logging on LinkedIn every 5 seconds and posting something. It's
Right.
like to be more intentional.
Totally.
Whole point.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of engaging on the platform, which is just logging on, liking things, interacting, we say if you want to be really successful on LinkedIn in terms of engagement, just spend honestly like 3 to 5 minutes a day interacting with other things on there, other content. So that is like how much time you can think about spending just logging on and checking things out and liking, commenting, etc. In terms of creating your own content, so two things. One, you really don't need to be posting more than once a week. If there are great things going on that you want to amplify, or say you have a speaking opportunity and then you're also attending a WIT webinar or something like that, both in the same week, great. Like that would be totally fine to do both of those things, but you don't need to really be doing more than one a week. And so what I would say is at the beginning of each quarter, take like 45 minutes, sit down, look at your calendar and see, okay, I have 12 weeks ahead of me. Of those 12 weeks, I know that during 6 of those weeks, I have happenings. I either have a board meeting, I have this webinar, I have this thing, or this thing that I'm going to do a post around. And then that will really help you understand, okay, that means I have 6 more weeks where I need to fill in the gaps. So I need to be on the lookout for like an article to share, a colleague who just got a promotion to amplify or something like that. So I would say actually, if you just take a little bit of the time at the beginning of the quarter or at the beginning of the month, depending on how quickly things are like being confirmed on your calendar, that will really give you a sense and an intention of what content you actually have to create versus what you're just, you know, curating or repost. Say Wit posts about something, you can share it and add your own reflection to it. And that's great. That's an amazing post for the week, you know? But you don't, I mean, anything more than 2 a week on LinkedIn kind of becomes a little spammy. So we don't want to do that. And that's good. That takes the pressure off, you know, you don't have to do something every day.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Since we still have a couple minutes and we didn't really touch on this much, I guess, how do we think about maybe integrating Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook and other platforms into like our professional brand versus kind of maintaining our personal brand and like whatever we use those platforms for, like just maybe some commentary on other platforms would be helpful.
Yeah. So on Instagram, you know, I would say any of your, I know I keep using this word, but any of your like happenings. So events that you attend, networking things, workshops you go to, speaking engagements you have, those are totally appropriate to be on Instagram. Totally. They should definitely be on LinkedIn, but those are like the great kinds of things, you know, because Instagram is it's about creating a story. It's not really about like, I mean, obviously some Instagram accounts are very information heavy, but if you're just like as a person, I think it's best to continue to focus on you and how this levels up to your story. And so anytime you do something fun like that, that's professionally related, I would think about putting it on Instagram. And then for Twitter, I mean, Twitter is like essentially like a news source, you know, and so I think, you know, there are just so many ways to think about Twitter. Like I would say at a minimum, like you could follow the accounts that are related to your industry, retweet them, comment on them. Like if they're posting about something, it'd probably be okay for you to post about it. Things that are interesting to you, things that are more like politically like global affairs focused, I think is better for Twitter. And then of course, like global activation days, like International Women's Day, or, you know, any of the other kind of global days that we have, Twitter is like always the most kind of happening place for those things. And then Facebook, I mean, honestly, unless you're like trying to be an influencer or sell something, I only have one client currently who is actually working on Facebook. And that's because it serves, like she's an author, and so she promotes her book on Facebook. But other than that, we really just have Facebook stay like very personal, and that the individuals just kind of run on their own and not really use it professionally, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Does that help?
Totally.
Yeah. Great. Hey, Pauline.
Yeah, I just have actually a last question. It's more about a comment that I heard from, this is actually a British CEO, Stephen Bartlett from Social Chain. He'd mentioned something about invincible branding. And I think he was talking about the context, like in, you know, kind of like the physical world, just in terms of, you know, not only do we have this kind of like, let's say, personal branding, we also have something called invincible branding, where, you know, it just happens the way you, for example, talk to someone, that's something that they then later remember and maybe can factor in, you know, for example, promotions and things like this. So I just wanted to know if this also applies in the online context when we're talking about personal branding as well, and how can we actually leverage this if it does apply?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so are you saying invincible branding is just essentially like your impression, like your personal impression?
He kind of, yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of how he,
Yeah.
he alluded to.
I mean, yes, I would say like it totally, like the goal is to like what we find is that a lot of these people, like they have very strong in-person professional reputations. And so the goal is to have the digital and the social media brand and the online brand mirror the in-person reputation. And so if you have a very strong in-person reputation, you should think about, okay, what are those things that are making good impressions and that are leaving people with? What do I hear from people? You know, ask your friends, ask your colleagues, you know, like, how do you think of me? How do you view me? Like, what is the impression I leave you with? And then those things you should be thinking about as you build that online presence, because you want it to really mirror itself, right? Like you want it to be about you. And when you go to somebody's LinkedIn, like they should be able to hear your voice and notice the things that you're talking about on LinkedIn are mirroring the things that you talk about on like in person and things like that. Because the best way to maintain consistency and like do it over time is to have it be about you. And one thing we know is that we're not static people. We're always changing and evolving over time. And so the brand presence, along with the personal presence, will change and evolve and grow as you grow as a person. But I definitely think, like, you know, if you are making a really great in-person impression, you should really think about how to understand what that is and then use those things to build an online presence as well.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's 1 o'clock for me, unless there's any more questions, we can close. No more questions? All right. Thank you, Madeline, and thank you everyone for joining us. Stacy, you have a question.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say thank you. I have been listening. I had to turn the camera off, but I've been listening. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to talk more, just reach out to us. Be happy to chat and brainstorm further.
Yeah, and thanks. Hopefully this was helpful for you, and check out the WIT website for upcoming events. And thank you, Madeline. And happy International Women's Day, even though it's a day ahead later, but yeah. And have a good one, everyone.
Thank you. Nice to be with
you.
you all.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.